We are so fortunate and honored to be joined by the Athletics Director from Indiana University, Scott Dolson. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, first of all.
Hey, no problem, Jim. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Man, and I know it is a busy time for you. I know there's not a lot going on with the Big Ten Conference right now. So, but what a crazy time. And
Jim,
I know
this will take 1 second. You got to mute me for 1 second.
Not a problem. When the president calls, we do whatever it takes, people. And the president is calling. So Scott's going to step out for just a second, and he'll join us back. But the first thing I was going to talk to him about is all of the changes in the landscape and how IU is going to navigate, benefit. What are some potential pitfalls to look at? I look at some questions here. Robbie I'll bring it up now since he's not here because I'm going to answer this. Why didn't you go after Steve Alford? For what? For a basketball coach? Well, I would suggest that you look at his record, specifically his record in the tournament. In nearly 30 years, he has made 5 trips to the Sweet 16, maybe, I think, if that. So he just does not have a great record in the tournament. But that's neither here nor there. But as Scott joins us back,
yeah, Scott, sorry. I told you I was expecting a call. We've got, as you said, so much going on with the Big Ten.
It was perfect. Hey, I said when the president calls, baby, but I was able to get through that because I'm talking about what I'm just going to bring up first is the gigantic change in the college landscape, especially in regards to the Big Ten. And with all of this, I still think that this may help IU in some ways in certain areas with certain programs, but nobody knows better than you. As you are navigating this and looking at this, what are you seeing, first of all?
Yeah, first of all, one of the things that I think is probably important is that there's so much change going on, as you said, in college athletics in general. And you can see it all around the country and the conference expansion, teams moving around. And it's hard because it's a really good thing for the Big Ten. But at the same time, I do feel, and I know Tony Petitti, our new commissioner, who I really love, I think he's awesome. The reality is there are some schools that are out without a conference right now, and that makes it a little hard. So it's hard to kind of celebrate when you see other schools on the outside looking in. But at the same time, for the conference, as we try to navigate moving forward, what's best for the future, I think these moves strategically, starting with USC and UCLA, and now with Washington, Oregon, are really, really good for the conference. I think trickling down is really good for us. And it's hard for me to say it's an exciting time because, again, from an empathy standpoint, I do feel for those other schools, but I do believe, Jim, that it's really good for us. And this is alphabetical, so it's not like I was voted in on this, but I am now the chair of the Big Ten ADs.
Congratulations.
Josh Whitman just went off as of June 30th, so I took over. And as a result of that, I had a unique position to kind of work closely with Tony Petitti as we work through this. And it was a very interesting process and one that I supported wholeheartedly. And again, for the future of the Big Ten, for multiple reasons, these two schools are great fits for us.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to the excitement of covering Indiana. I'm looking forward to Indiana and UCLA in Pauley Pavilion, or in UCLA and Indiana in Assembly Hall. Those are exciting things. On the football side, they're exciting games. But the biggest thing, and this has nothing to do with the realignment, just the dissolution of the divisions, I think, is something that is going or can help the IU football program immeasurably, because it just seems like it takes a Bedford stone rock off of their back of having to play, knowing you're going to have to play 3 top 5 teams every stinking year. And that will alleviate and sometimes make the schedule a little easier and feasible.
Jim, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's something that Tom Allen and I have talked about a great deal, way back before even the USC and UCLA conversation started, was really, it was just challenging for us. And it's hard because sometimes you look at that as, is that loser talk, or you just have to play the teams that are in front of you, which we agree with and we wholeheartedly do. But, fair and balanced scheduling is really important. And I think moving forward, the ability to make certain that our schedule has the same weighted opponents as maybe other like teams in our league, and that's one of the things that divisions, having, it's no secret, having Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan in our division and playing those three schools year in and year out was really challenging. And again, we're not complaining. We just want to make certain it's a fair and even playing field across the board. And we look forward to the new schedule. We're working on that right now. In fact, now that we've added Oregon and Washington, kind of what that's going to look like. But from my perspective, representing Indiana and us, is that it's really, really important that it's a balanced schedule, that other schools have the same strength of schedule as we do year in and year out.
And with that said, I know that you have just, ironically, a couple of days ago, I was talking about things regarding the stadium, and then the next day the announcement came out. You guys were sending out that questionnaire, so I'm glad I was able to prompt that. Just kidding. But we'll talk about that and with that. But is there going to be a bigger commitment to the football program, especially with the potential opportunity here that we just talked about of getting that rock off of you, of maybe now being able to grow a little bit?
Yeah, I think maybe bigger commitment is probably the commitment's been there. And sometimes maybe from a fan's perspective, they don't see it. I give Fred Glass a ton of credit. If you look back in his tenure and the different things that we've done to invest in football, and he and I talked a lot about that in terms of football. You can't just turn the support for football. It's not a spigot you turn on and off. You need to keep the stream going and continually be proactive on what's next. But I will say, having said all that adding UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington, the stakes have gone up higher. And from my perspective, I remember after it was official that we're adding Oregon and Washington, coming back to my office and just sitting here thinking that, hey, we were proactive before, but we need to double down. The Big Ten football is the best of the best, and we need to make certain that we're proactive and we're on the move, and we have a vision for all aspects of the football program. That's not to say we didn't before, but again, adding the brands that we've added certainly takes it up even another notch. So it's kind of one of those situations, Jim, either you innovate or you die, or either you innovate or you're proactive or you're going to get run over. So whether it's our fan experience, whether it's our facilities for our players, our staff, whether it's investing in any aspect that we can, that we think is smart, that's strategic, we need to be proactive in that area, and we'll continue to do that.
With the stadium questionnaire coming out, what I had talked about is obviously the press box has been there since like the late 60s. And not from a press box standpoint, but I've always said that IU needs a new press box. But I'm talking, we call it that, but it's actually the suites is what it mainly is. Is there any thought, any thinking yet to doing that, putting those up there? And I know that that's a tough thing to do because these things are not cheap. But the corporate suites as a revenue generator, any thoughts to that happening anytime soon?
Well, the reality is that's what the survey and all of our preliminary work that we've already started, and now the survey is a piece of that, is to really take a step back and say, what do we need if the stadium is really operating at the highest level across the board, particularly from a fan experience, from a revenue generating standpoint? What do we need? How many premium seats, whether it's club seats, whether it's suites, how many do we need? What do we need from a media standpoint? What do we need from a stadium operations standpoint? What are the modern day concession stands? How can we transform those restrooms? One of the things that is important to me is that from a fan experience standpoint, we strive obviously to sell out every game. Well, I want to make certain that when we do sell out, that it's a positive experience, meaning that the concourses are accessible, that the restroom lines aren't so long that it becomes a miserable experience, and so forth and so on. So back to your question specific to the press box, once we determine what the overall scope should be for the stadium, again, being proactive, looking forward, then you can get into more of the detail of, can we do that with the existing press box? Can we not? What changes do we need to make in terms of the overall structure, concourses, et cetera? And then ultimately, on a parallel track, we have to really determine what's feasible as well. Because obviously and I grew up in the fundraising world and been involved in several projects where you put the project out and the need and kind of the case for what we're going to do for the stadium, and then you're into the fundraising mode and to make certain you can make it happen. So you need to have that feasibility part to put the pro forma together financially, while at the same time looking at all aspects of the stadium. And this one is from a fan experience standpoint, which includes suite, stadium, club seats, all those types of things. And I just don't know yet what the scope will look like in terms of what the overall project will entail until we get all that information gathered.
Got it. One thing I've been wondering, and I know that there are a lot of things that would go into this, that it may not be feasible because football days are long days. It's an 8-hour day for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, that's an 8-hour day from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And it is for a lot of fans, but it's longer than that for people like security people, because they're there before I am, and they're not there after I leave, but they're there before I am. So I don't know how long the day is. But what about adding concerts to home football games? Is there something that makes that not feasible?
We've looked at that off and on over the years. One of the challenges is, and that this isn't insurmountable, but whenever you combine two events into one, it becomes challenging in terms of both from a stadium operations standpoint and a ticketing standpoint. That's not to say that again, it's impossible to do that. You generally then need to take a step back and say, what are we really going to get out of that? If we have a concert post game, if we have combining events, we've done a lot of looking into, even with basketball. Do we have a doubleheader with our men's and women's teams? Is there ways to really drive fan support, fan experience? And so it's something that we continue to look at. It's not something that again, this is my personal belief, Jim, that I'm not a big gimmick person, meaning I think our football program should be able to drive traffic based on the overall fan experience, tailgating, the great Big Ten schedule, what we're doing on the field, and hopefully creating that excitement. I've never been a huge proponent of, hey, it's kind of like you say you're going to a fight and a hockey game broke out. I'm not big into saying you go to a concert and a football game broke out. I think the football should really speak for itself. And then ultimately, if there are things to put around that create a better fan experience, we're all in. But it's still Big Ten football, and particularly with the additions from the West Coast, I think Big Ten football is going to continue to grow. And then we've got to do our part from a fan experience standpoint to create that desire for our fans to be here at Memorial Stadium, because when they are, I believe it's as good as it gets. And you've been here, Jim. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader or a homer here, but I've been around all the Big Ten, and when it's going well here, from an overall fan experience standpoint, from, as I said, the tailgating fields and coming into the game, and Memorial Stadium is rocking, it's a great atmosphere, and we just need to continue to build on that.
That's like I always say for anything, winning cures it all, man. Winning cures all.
Absolutely.
Kent asked, how will Big Ten realignment affect the Olympic sports? I've always said I'm imagining they're just going to have a lot more regional events with more teams, especially like cross country. It's how they do it in high schools. You just have more teams there. Swimming, you can do that. There's so many of those sports where you can have multiple teams. It doesn't even really matter. Softball, all those, you can have round robins, etc. And I'm thinking that's going to be the case.
Yeah, Jim, first of all, competition goes up. I was just talking to a few people about this yesterday, when it was back to being the original kind of Big Ten, it was meaningful certainly to win a Big Ten championship. But as we've had conference expansion over the years, you go to 11 and 14, 16, now 18, winning a Big Ten championship always was very special, very meaningful. But I think winning a Big Ten championship with the level of competition now across the board is even going to be that much more meaningful. In addition to that, I think from a travel standpoint, from an impact on our student athletes, we're going to work very closely with the conference staff, with Commissioner Petiti, from a scheduling standpoint to make certain that we can, as you said, maybe do some really unique scheduling to make certain that we limit travel as best we can, and to make certain we're looking out for student athlete welfare. One of the things that from our perspective, and many fans don't realize this, our water polo program, which is a highly successful varsity sport for us, our women's water polo program travels to the West Coast probably 6 or 7 times a year, because that's where water polo is very prominent, where there's the teams we need to play. And so we've really learned how, from an academic standpoint, how from a student athlete welfare standpoint, how to adjust, how to make certain that our student athletes are in the best position they can be. And so there's no question we'll have more trips out west, but nowhere near for our other Olympic sports to the level that water polo does. So I think we're set up to handle it. If volleyball needs to go to the West Coast one time a year and do some play multiple games in some real group scheduling, I don't think it'll really be a negative impact at all. In fact, it'll be a great experience for them and a great opportunity to play against some high quality teams. So the scheduling is a big proponent of putting together this plan for our conference expansion.
And volleyball and wrestling are two programs that have also been on the rise, man. Angel Escobedo has done a hell of a job. Steve Aird doing a hell of a job, because both of those sports are the Big Ten that happens to be the best in both of those sports. So congratulations to both of those. You have the largest student section in all of college basketball, but they're pinned up in the corner. And I know that you've got longtime season ticket holders, but it would seem to make in Assembly Hall such an unbelievably hard place to play if the students were more around the court. Any chance of that ever happening, at least on one side in the end zones, maybe?
Well, we've continued to look at our student seating in basketball, and that's one of the advantages I've had of kind of being here a long time, is that I've seen it all and looked at different plans, and there's no question that providing the best student experience possible is really, really important to us. In fact, it's a top priority. I know a lot of people would say, yeah, you've got to drive revenue and it's about the money. And I get that, but I think we've proven by having the largest student section that if we're truly about money, we would cut a lot of student tickets and sell those at a full market price, which we're not interested in doing, because again, the student experience is really important. Having said that, we think we've made adjustments. We do have the students on the court level in the one end zone. We've looked at ways potentially down the road, can we put them back in the other end zone and adjust to move those general public seats into the stands somehow. We continue to look at that and find ways to maybe, as I said, create a better student experience, but at the same time, make certain that we are accommodating for our fans who've had season tickets for a long time. One of the challenges with Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall is students like to stand the whole game. So by putting them in certain sections, if they're going to stand, not only do you block or take those seats out, you block the views of other fans around them. And so that doesn't mean that, again, it's impossible to try to tweak it and find ways for a better student experience. But you have to take into account a lot of things. As I like to say, if it were easy, we would just do it. But we want it all, and we want to make sure we have a great student experience. And actually, what's interesting is when our opponents come to play at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall Gym, and this is across the board, the overall atmosphere, the home court advantage from students on out is always, and this is just a fact. And I remember talking to Roy Williams in North Carolina's AD a few years back when North Carolina came in with a really good team and we beat them. And they said, we've never seen anything like this. I mean, it's unbelievable, the atmosphere here and the energy and just the way that everyone is on top of you. So certainly we have to tweak it. It's kind of a long answer. I'm always open to, hey, we're not just doing it because we've always done it this way, but at the same time, it's pretty good. And sometimes you have to take a step back and realize that it's not totally broken. Let's just tweak it and make certain we continue to find ways to create the best student experiences we can.
Oh yeah, I remember Roy's comment. He said, "Gosh, I wish we had fans like this down in North Carolina, except for the Duke game."
Right.
That was his comment. Rick
And
Bozich, our good friend, is
just Jim, real quick, one other thing about that. Our students have been phenomenal. I mean, absolutely, coming out of the pandemic, you never know what you're going to get, but the student support across the board, football, men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, student athletic board gets a ton of credit for that. But I just think overall, our student ticket sales right now for football were over 11,000, and other schools would look at that and just kill for those numbers. And I just can't thank our students enough. And I don't think maybe they get enough credit just across the board. When you go to a baseball game, our student support is just really, really strong. And again, we don't take it for granted, and we really appreciate it.
Our friend Rick Bozich joins us today, but I wanted to bring him in while he was on here because I know that you guys know each other as well. And I figured, Rick, you'd jump in. And how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm just in between all the different crazy stuff going on here at the University of Louisville.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good, Scott. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Rick, a question for Scott.
Football season coming up, and you've been to practice. We haven't been. What do you like about what you've seen so far?
Yeah, the first thing for me, and I actually attended this scrimmage last Saturday, but the first thing, I really, really like the coaching staff additions we've made. And I think, in fact, the Big Ten Network crew was at the scrimmage last week with Jerry DiNardo and Dave Revson and Howard Griffith, and I stood with them on the field for about 30 minutes and watched it. And it's funny because at one point they pointed to Bob Bostad, our offensive line coach, and said that may be the biggest addition you guys have had during the off season. And it sounds like sometimes when I'm talking about this, Rick and Jim, I sound like a homer, and I'm not trying to sell anything, or I'm just being candid with you. I grew up an IU fan, and I want the same things our fans do. But I think the first thing is when you look at Matt Guerrero, defensive coordinator, and what he's doing, I just like our staff. So that's the first thing for me. I love the additions. From a team standpoint, we certainly just the eye test. Again, you're talking to an administrator here, not a coach, but I think seeing what we've done through the transfer portal, seeing kind of the young recruiting classes we've had the past couple of years take shape. I think physically, particularly on both lines, and particularly there on the defensive line, I'd say we look the part. We look more athletic. We've just got some strength there, and I think that's evident. And the Big Ten Network crew kind of agreed with that, and they pointed that out to me. The big thing is, which you guys have talked about, I'm sure ad nauseum, is the quarterback battle, and see who ultimately is going to emerge as the starting quarterback. And it's not rocket scientist to say that's such an important position. I don't care if it's high school, college, or pros. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm optimistic. If you'd have told me coming off of last season we'd be where we are today across the board, I would be thrilled. And I give Tom, all the credit in the world for really, pulling up his bootstrings or whatever you call it, and really making certain that we get to work and roll up our sleeves. And I think we put ourselves in a good position for a successful season.
Yep. Sean has a good question. With all of this expansion, do you think Indianapolis is in danger of losing the Big Ten championship specifically? Because Los Angeles, the big TV market, would, that sounds exciting. Playing in the Rose Bowl, playing in Memorial Coliseum, or playing in SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, that's a great question. And with the new commissioner, with Tony coming in, and again, I said earlier how impressed I am with him, and what an incredible he's kind of a behind the scenes person that maybe a lot of people, including myself, I didn't know a lot about Tony Petitti before he's hired, but he's just really blown me away. How impressive he is, how he's understated, but he's the smartest person in the room and doesn't care if anybody knows it. He just wants what's best for the Big Ten, and he's really, really good. I'm just so impressed with him. We have not gotten into detailed discussions at all about the future of the Big Ten football championship or quite frankly, men's and women's basketball. But I do know this. I know that Indianapolis has continued to underpromise and overdeliver. I mean, they just do such a phenomenal job. Mike Babinski, Purdue's AD, was on here with me. He and I both would say we have a thumb on the scale to try to help Indianapolis. And honestly, we don't have to do much because I think the way they deliver speaks for itself. So I don't know what the future holds. We haven't talked about moving that game around the country yet, but I would still, just given the past performance and the way that, particularly from the football championship game, the way it's gone, I would hope that Indianapolis would continue to have really that opportunity, if not every year, certainly a great amount of the years that we move forward.
You may have already answered this one, Scott, but what motivated you or what inspired you to undertake the project you announced this week of looking at the modernization of and improvement at Memorial Stadium?
Yeah, really, Rick, it really is that we have to be proactive. We have to have a vision for football. And it wasn't brand new. We've been talking about it. I talked about it, to be totally candid with you, during my interview for the athletic director position. I was asked about where we are from a facility standpoint, because Fred Glass did a phenomenal job improving our facilities across the board. And they said, well, I assume you're pretty good from a facility standpoint. I said, I think that the next thing is we have to have a vision for the stadium. I think from a fan experience standpoint, our projects that Fred accomplished, which were amazing during that time period, the north and south end zones are fantastic. They're student focused, which is really important to us and me, the way we added those. But now I think the next thing from an infrastructure standpoint, the stadium's got so many great qualities, but it's just like Simon Scott Assembly Hall. It doesn't handle a full crowd at the level I think it needs to. And I thought that before we added the 4 West Coast schools. And now that the Big Ten really is, you could say doubling down on football moving forward, we have to make certain, and I think it'd be malpractice if I didn't have a vision, not just for our program, for our football program to grow and to be successful in the Big Ten, but from a fan experience standpoint, it would be malpractice if we weren't looking at our stadium saying, what should it look like in 10 years? What does a modern fan need from everything from restroom concessions, from a press box standpoint, from a premium seating standpoint, to have a vision for that so that we can be, it's kind of, I said this earlier to Jim, if you're not innovative and looking forward, you're going to get run over, and we have to always be looking ahead. And so again, I think it's really important for me in my position and our staff to understand that in the future, what should this stadium, what do we need so that when other Big Ten schools come here to compete, that we've got a stadium that is kind of equivalent to what a Big Ten stadium needs to look like. And we've done great things to improve it tremendously, but now we need to keep that growing.